Good afternoon, everyone. The internet and the cloud has fundamentally transformed the way that we communicate and access information. It's reshaped society and provided people with access across the world with opportunities that for so long have been beyond their reach. And we're all here because the internet excites us, right? We understand the profound impact for the better that this interconnectedness of technology has had on our lives. But we're not passive enjoyers of this technology. We are also writing its future. The people in this room do get a say in the direction that this technology will take. So in this talk, I want to take a step back and actually look at what is the direction that we're heading in with the internet. And as a hopeless optimist, I can't help but focus on the endless possibilities that await us. But I also want to make sure that we are realistic about the flip side of this hyperconnected world and the fact that while the internet does lift us up, it has also become one of the most potent enablers of totalitarian surveillance that the world has ever seen. These are strong words to start a speech with, especially at a cloud computing conference. So, I just want to gauge the audience. Who here thinks that privacy is important? Because you guys live in Switzerland, and it's one of the best places in the world for privacy. So that's awesome. I don't have to work too hard here. So in this talk, I want to explore the privacy implications of our growing digital world. I want to look at what kind of a future that we might be paving the way towards, and I'll explore what the world might look like if we no longer have privacy. What kinds of civil liberties might we lose? And then I want to dive into what we can do today to try to ensure the best possible future, because you guys are the people who are writing the future of the internet. And I just want to establish the goal of this talk is not to provide a doomer perspective, okay? It is the total opposite. I believe that we can build a future that we are all really excited about. And I don't think that the internet is destined to be a tool of oppression. Far from it. That is not at all my standpoint. I do, however, think that we need to scrutinize the choices that we make today and be mindful of all the pitfalls to be avoided. We should actually talk about these things, because that's how we can give ourselves the best chance of building a tool of empowerment for tomorrow. And one of the most tremendously important things that we should be far more mindful of as we build out this technology is privacy. It often comes as an afterthought. But not here, not in Switzerland, as we've established. So I think it's particularly impactful to explore these ideas at this conference, because Switzerland has long been recognized for its deep-seated value of privacy. Switzerland has a robust legal framework. It has things like the Federal Data Protection Act. There are stringent regulations on cross-border data transfers. It doesn't have any mandatory data retention laws for VPNs. Switzerland has really carved out a reputation as a global beacon for privacy rights. So I want to take an opportunity at this conference to dive into privacy as a topic here amongst receptive peers. I didn't ask, because I saw a lot of hands, who here doesn't think privacy is important? Yeah, you're scared to put up your hand now. All right. So let's get started by talking about the current state of privacy in the world today. And it's not great. It's pretty bad. So pervasive surveillance has become a normalized part of today's culture. Devices like Amazon's Alexa, Google's Home constantly listen to our conversations. We put them in intimate places like our living rooms and our bedrooms. Google's search engine and tracking tools monitor our online activities. They share our data with thousands of companies, major services from Microsoft to Facebook to Amazon to Zoom and Adobe and half the companies represented at the conference and every tech conference you go to, because it's just become a normal part of using the internet, are all collecting a huge amount of user data. And then there are the data brokers, these hidden digital pack rats of the internet who are hoarding every scrap of our digital lives that they can get access to, and they're selling access to this data to others. Cars these days. I'm currently researching a piece on car data collection. Oh my goodness, that is a whole rabbit hole. So cars are constantly monitoring everything we do. Your car is a cell phone, it is a wireless hotspot, it is a Wi-Fi receiver, it is a Bluetooth transmitter and receiver, it is logging when you unlock your car and when you start the engine and turn a corner, and it logs how fast you're driving, and it records video of everywhere you go, which is scary. Let's not talk about all the people that can hack into that video because it's terribly insecure. It records audio of you. All of this data is also shared with countless entities. Doorbells record video of us, of our neighbors, of suburban streets. They capture audio, sometimes from 30 feet away. So we're talking down the street or in your living room. It's capturing that audio. And then again, we don't get a say in who has access to this data. The realm of IoT devices introduces a cascade of unintended data sharing. For example, thanks to things like Amazon's Sidewalk program, many users might believe that by disconnecting their devices from personal Wi-Fi, they're effectively rendering them offline. However, with the automatic opt-in nature of Sidewalk for many US users, for example, and other people across the world, devices continue to connect to this shared network, transmitting data even when users think that they're isolated. The portable telly screens we keep in our pockets. They all have cameras, they all have microphones, we take them everywhere we go. They see whom we meet, what we do, they hear what we say. They not only track our location, but our online activities, like what we click, what we read, what's in our emails, what's in our private conversations, our health data, our financial choices, our mental health status. And again, we have no control over who gets access to this data. Everywhere we go, we encounter facial recognition software, CCTV, tracking via Wi-Fi beaconing, RFID tags, BLA. I mean, the list goes on. This isn't going to be a talk where I'm just like, here are all the ways that your data is collected, because that would be terrible. So let me take a step back, because I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I am a technophile. I'm obsessed with technology. I'm always using all the latest gadgets. It has improved my life tremendously, because technology is wonderful like that. So I'm not someone who tells people they need to throw out their digital devices. Far from it. The point that I'm simply making by highlighting some of the rudimentary tech that we have in our lives is that, indeed, we have hit a point where we are under constant surveillance. And it seems benign. We've opted into, a lot of these things, or sometimes we're unaware that it's happening, but it is constant surveillance. Most of the time, as I said, we're unintentionally sending this data out. Oftentimes, companies will obscure the specifics of their data sharing practices, leaving users in the dark about how to opt out or evade such tracking. But despite us not knowing the specifics of how digital surveillance is taking place, we all have a vague understanding that our digital lives are like open sieves and constantly broadcasting our private activities. That's become very normalized today. So what are the implications of this pervasive monitoring? I want to explore two big ones. First, constant surveillance and the continual accumulation of data go hand in hand. So we should be concerned about that because it shifts power away from individuals to centralized entities, and it potentially jeopardizes future freedoms. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is that constant surveillance has deep psychological effects on society. So let's start with the first implication, risks to freedom. We may be very comfortable here in Switzerland. As I said, it is one of the best places in the world for privacy. It's something I wish the rest of the world would emulate. But by looking at some of the most authoritarian regimes around the world, we can really start to see the oppressive potential of surveillance and data collection. So in North Korea, constant monitoring gives the regime an iron grip on its citizens, and it's ubiquitous. China, they have a social credit system that converges financial habits, daily activities, social graph into centralized metrics that basically determine whether your children can attend certain schools, whether you're allowed a travel pass to leave your hometown, if you've been well behaved enough to catch the fast train, if you're allowed to book hotel rooms. This data is seriously weaponized in certain countries. In Nigeria, a CBDC, or programmable government money, puts the Nigerian government at the center of every financial transaction so that money can be more easily tracked, frozen, seized, or even programmed to be erased if certain spending conditions are not met. Lives are monitored and controlled through financial choices. And by the way, CBDCs are coming to every country in the world, so hang on, it's just going to be a few years away. We look at this and we can already see how data collection has been weaponized around the world. But as I said, we're sitting here and we're comfortable and we can ignore that because, does this even happen in countries like Switzerland? Does it happen in countries like Australia or the United States? Does the lack of privacy even present the same kinds of risks in more free countries where those leaders are democratically elected? It's worth exploring. Now, we know that the data collection itself is ubiquitous, regardless of country, so it happens in places that are more free just as much as it happens in places that are less free. It's collected by private entities and governments alike, and these two phenomena are deeply connected because the information that we hand over to companies is overwhelmingly siphoned up by governments who have the aim to store it in perpetuity. They want to keep that data forever. And governments around the world collect this data from private companies using all kinds of different methods. So they run intelligence programs to intercept the data. In the US, the PRISM program is one famous example that came out with the Snowden leaks, which basically allows the US direct access to servers of major tech companies. And it's unclear whether this is an agreement with the companies or whether it's a backdoor. Companies have denied knowing about it. In the UK, there are programs like Tempora. This is a full-take data collection program, which means that every bit of data that is entering and leaving servers in the UK is captured. And there are all kinds of data sharing agreements and reciprocal relationships between different governments regarding access to this data. There are programs like Tempest, Turbulence, Turmoil. There are indexing and search systems like XKeyscore. The programs that allow vast mass collection of data are countless, and we can presume that we don't know half of them, probably don't even know a fraction of them. But they're out there. And then let's just put the government programs aside. On top of those in-house collection programs, there's also an immense amount of data being purchased by world governments in bulk from data brokers. So the data brokers that are going and collecting all the information from companies, all the public information, governments are now just purchasing that. And then there are often good relationships between large companies and government agencies that allow unfettered access to private conversations with the click of a button. There are companies like Ring that have intentionally sought out relationships with law enforcement agencies to boost their product sales, and they're willing to hand over footage without a warrant. There's systematic data collection programs like census data. There's KYC for every bit of data that's ever touched financial payment rails. The volume of data amassed by governments, whether democratic or not, is staggering. Now, the real concern isn't whether data is being collected, it's how it's being utilized. So how is it being utilized? Now, data is used by companies to give us better tools and better services to improve user experience. It's used by governments to help us catch the bad guys. And let's, for the sake of argument, just presume that these are the only ways that this data is currently being used in more free countries. Let's just presume that, give it the benefit of the doubt. But here's the important point that I want you to take away with you. It's that regimes come and go. Social norms change. But our data is forever, and there is no telling how the information collected about us today might be used in the future. We need to realize that data that we allow to be collected today is permanently stored for any future government to pick over at any time in the future, or for any future hacker, or for any future hostile nation state who wants to use the data against citizens of another country, or any future terrorist group, or any future president turned autocrat who suddenly decides that they don't like a certain segment of the population. All of this data is this treasure trove that we're presuming is benign because it's in the hands of benign governments, and we have no say over who gets access to it in the future. Laws can change overnight. We can make no guarantees about our civil liberties in the future, even if we trust the leadership of a country today. Sudden legal shifts can instantly transform law-abiding citizens into criminals. What if cryptocurrency were banned overnight? I'm sure there are a lot of people in this room who suddenly become criminals. What about end-to-end encryption? Even more people in this room who suddenly become criminals. These things are on the table right now. There are countries that are exploring, banning all of these things. What about alternative medicines? What about certain political views? So a cursory glance at history shows us countless instances of complete, total loss of freedom due to shifted societal norms and civil liberties. So in Hong Kong, 2020, China imposed its national security law, which granted authorities broad powers to crack down on dissent. It was once a bastion of freedom. The protest culture there was so strong, and then suddenly this law resulted in the immediate suppression of speech, particularly of political expression, and led to the arrest of pro-democracy activists, the disbandment of all political opposition parties, the closure of many independent media outlets. The Iranian Revolution in 1979 led to the establishment of an Islamic Republic and rapid change in societal norms and personal freedoms, all within a single year. And women in particular lost many of their rights. The construction of the Berlin Wall, 1961, it separated East Berlin from West Berlin overnight, resulting in the immediate loss of freedom for over 1 million people, including freedom to travel, freedom of speech, assembly, association, economic activity. And those trapped in East Berlin had to endure this situation for 28 years. The dangers of data permanence in a world where societal norms and laws are constantly changing is a real threat, because this data might be used by any government or entity in the future for any reason of their choosing. Another threat to consider is the surveillance asymmetry of the modern digital era. There's a great video by a Slovenian political scientist, Samo Burja, who explains how the internet has made us far more visible to governments and corporations, but it has not made governments and large corporations more visible to us. And this information asymmetry is crucial for control. We can already see countless examples of this imbalance of power being abused, where the surveillance put into the back doors of our lives can harm people just as much as it potentially protects them. And there are countless examples like this officer in Kentucky who used his insider access to law enforcement backdoors to hack people's Snapchat accounts and get nudes from women. That happens more than we would like to admit. And we often hear of systematized overreach as a result of this imbalance in power in various government organizations like the NSA workers who apparently pass around nudes in the office of people they spied on. Snowden talked about that in his book. And intelligence workers who use their privileged access to surveillance tools to spy on romantic interests is so common that they created an entire, intelligence domain for it called LoveInt as a way to describe it. These cases are few and far between, and overwhelmingly in more free countries, data isn't being weaponized, overwhelmingly. Of course, there are cases where it is. But the point is that when corporations and governments collect large amounts of data about us, it inherently creates power imbalances. And at their core, governments and organizations are made up of people. This resulting concentration of power risks being misused by individuals within these entities against those in more vulnerable positions. It's worth being mindful of this. So as the builders in this room envision and create innovative tools built upon the internet, we should contemplate the future that we might be enabling. Relying on hope that the wrong individual won't get access to our systems isn't a robust safety strategy. Likewise, we can't just hope that the data we're collecting remains benign while legal landscapes and societal norms keep changing around us. Instead, it's essential that we focus on fortifying what we build to safeguard the balance of power and protect individual freedoms. And there are so many ways that we can do this, that we can protect ourselves, and I'll dive into some of them in a moment. But I want to first explore the psychological effects of pervasive surveillance. While these psychological effects might be less overt than other risks that we've discussed, they're no less significant. There are popular archetypal examples of pervasive surveillance that we can look at to help illustrate the deep impact it has on society. So take this cliche. Who's read this book? In America, everyone's read it, but I'm not sure about Switzerland. All right, 1984. I'm sure we've all heard of it if we haven't read it. It's a chilling dystopian narrative. It paints a world drowning in fear and paranoia. Citizens are always under the threat of surveillance from telescreens and think poll, and they risk punishment for any unorthodox beliefs or sentiments. But referencing an Orwellian future in privacy discussions these days is somewhat cliche. Now, 1984, it does epitomize the dystopian risks stemming from authoritarianism and total surveillance, but it has such a dramatic flair that, it's so frequently cited as well that I think we often dismiss the lessons from it. So let's pivot to another illustrative model, the panopticon. It's a circular prison with a central watchtower. There's only one guard, and he can't possibly watch everyone at once. But the prisoners have no idea who he's watching. So it gives them this feeling of constant surveillance. So the prisoners start to regulate their own behavior, just in case the guard happens to be watching. And that's the key point. The prisoners start to regulate their own behavior. Now, we don't live in a circular prison. We don't live in Orwell's Oceania. But let's set aside the dramatic flair of these two symbols and just zoom in on the lessons that they teach us. Both 1984 and the Panopticon underscore the profound power of ever-present surveillance in molding human behavior. In the modern age, we are undeniably monitored all the time. And we may be a far cry from the extremes depicted in renowned sci-fi novels or abstract surveillance models such as this one, but surveillance is all around us, as we've established. And you might be tempted to think that, well, people are actually largely oblivious to this pervasive surveillance because they seem to go about their lives sending their innermost thoughts and activities into the ether, unaware of the countless entities that are collecting them. How could someone be psychologically affected by something that they're unaware of? But it's a mistake to think that people are completely in the dark about what's going on. It's 2023. And most of us have an instinctive understanding about the surveillance and data collection around us, even if we can't explicitly detail the extent or the methods of this monitoring. Its ever-presence creates crucial changes in behavior. First, and probably most obviously, constant surveillance creates a chilling effect. It stifles free speech, thought, and action due to fear of retribution. Now, when people feel that they're being watched or monitored, they're less likely to express their opinions or engage in activism, especially if it's controversial or goes against mainstream thought. Without private communication, agitation and pushback against authoritarianism becomes impossible. As privacy advocate Juan Angel put in his essay Privacy, The Hill to Die On, life in the panopticon of absolute digital surveillance forces humans to become shells of themselves, subjects who self-censor their own thoughts, behaviors, and expressions, even in private interactions. But along with internet surveillance and collection of our data, a fundamental shift happened due to the permanency of our actions. So Snowden talked about this in his memoir, Permanent Record, that our interactions with people used to be largely ephemeral. Our conversations, our mistakes, our private moments, they're all mainly fleeting when we're face-to-face with someone. And they're remembered only by those who were present, and they're often altered by the passage of time and the fallibility of memory. But now in the digital age, our every utterance, our every search, our every like, our every share has the potential to be catalogued and analyzed and remembered. And this takes the ephemeral and it makes it last forever. So what are the consequences of this? Now, Snowden says that, in the pre-internet times, people could grow, they could evolve, they could even reinvent themselves over the years. Mistakes or beliefs from our past didn't necessarily haunt us for life. But with every action and statement and thought being collected and recorded in the digital age, it really becomes difficult for individuals to move beyond their past selves. The consequence of our past opinions and beliefs etched permanently online is that it gives rise to this permanent self, instead of us being these living, breathing narratives shaped in real time. So when we say things and they become permanent, there's a tendency for us to become defensive about them instead of being open-minded. Admitting to change in our beliefs might seem like a weakness in face of this ever-present digital history. Knowing that our actions are constantly monitored and recorded can make us refrain from exploring new ideas or questioning the status quo because we fear the potential repercussions or judgments based on our digital trail. With every digital action being scrutinized, there's a subtle push towards conformity. It becomes safer to follow the herd than to stand out or challenge prevailing norms. And this leads to a society that values uniformity over individual thought. Our newfound digital shadow haunts us. And instead of spontaneous expressions or genuine searches for knowledge, we might lean towards actions that look better in our digital profile. There's this subtle internalization of our digital self that in some ways becomes more important than our real self. In a world like this, authenticity becomes scarce. It's replaced by curated personalities designed for digital consumption. These are profound shifts in the collective psyche of society that I think that we should be aware of. And I think they're important enough that we should start pushing back against normalizing the surveillance of our innermost worlds. Start thinking about what kind of a future are we creating for our children and our grandchildren if we're just normalizing this. So let's recap what we've covered so far. In the modern digital age, we are under constant surveillance. This affects us psychologically in subtle but profound ways. Constant surveillance also has the potential to threaten our free society because laws change, social norms change, but our data collected about us is forever, and we don't know how it will be used in the future. Now, with all of this in mind, we can no longer afford to ignore the importance of privacy in our lives. The internet may have started without keeping privacy in mind, but it shouldn't continue that way. So, how do we protect privacy better in the digital age? Well, the people in this room are all designing and implementing the structures that basically every part of the internet relies on, right? You're building the companies that facilitate the online activities of countless people. It's all of you who in large part get to determine how much surveillance is able to take place. The mass surveillance of today largely depends on individuals freely giving companies their data or not realizing they're giving companies this data. This data then proliferates, it's shared, it's siphoned up, it's collected, but it starts with those individuals first, just handing it over. And people naturally think, okay, so the individuals need to be convinced to stop doing this, right? Let's tell the individuals, start caring about your privacy, stop handing over your data. But rather than trying to change the behavior of billions of internet users, it is far more impactful for those building the tooling of the internet to start to prioritize privacy instead. After the 2013 Snowden revelations highlighted the vulnerabilities in data transmission and the extent of government surveillance that was going on, a tremendous shift happened on the internet. But it did not come from individuals who changed their habits, nor really from the adoption of better laws. It was the tech industry's response that completely changed the landscape of digital privacy. Internet traffic, although it was already on a trajectory towards greater encryption, experienced an accelerated shift from being roughly 30% encrypted in transit pre-Snowden to an estimated 80% encrypted in transit just a few years later. Major companies like Google and Apple intensified the call for robust encryption, and they were the ones who led the way for a huge uptick in adoption of encryption protocols. WhatsApp added end-to-end encryption to their messaging app, which turned on privacy for 1 billion people. That simple act, like flipping a switch, and suddenly all of these people had private communications. It was the builders of the internet tooling and services who created privacy shields for billions of users. The impact of this was huge. Every builder in this room can make an impact by being mindful of privacy when they come up with policies, architectural designs, and implementations of all the technology that they're developing. There are obviously costs to integrating privacy-minded changes. It's hard. Maybe companies don't have the resources. Maybe they don't have the bandwidth. These are huge issues. But I think we do have to start to recognize that there are also costs to not doing this. So what kind of changes might be helpful? First, the data collection side of things. So companies right now intentionally collect a lot of data about users. They store logs, they attach information to account profiles that include all kinds of data points about user interaction. The reason it's collected, as we've established, is because they can gain insight from that data. It can help them provide better services. This is the main push behind all this data collection. They also collect it because they can make money by selling this data. But they're focused mainly on the benefits of data collection. We have to recognize this data is also a huge liability. Companies are terrible at protecting data. They're terrible at it. John Chambers, former CEO of Cisco, once said there are two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those who don't yet know that they have been hacked. So user data is leaked all the time in data breaches, but it's not just hackers that we have to be mindful of. The data that you opt to collect might be sold to data brokers down the line, and you'll have no control over that decision. Or it might be demanded by governments that seek to do harm to someone. Now, there's an assumption with many companies that they should just by default collect as much data as possible, as much data as available. But many are increasingly realizing that it's irresponsible to collect data that they can't adequately protect. And they're adopting a data minimization approach where they consciously don't collect unnecessary data. This is worth considering. And then obviously there's encryption. So if you do collect data, is that data being securely stored? At the very most basic end, is any data stored in clear text? And I know people in the room are like, come on, data in clear text, no one even does that anymore. Except for Equifax, they stored passwords, they stored social security numbers, they stored home addresses, they stored all this sensitive information in clear text. In clear text. This is of 150 million people, so it does happen. You know, how is your company treating this data? Now, presuming that all of the data being amassed is encrypted, is it securely implemented? And who has access to the decryption keys? Can any employee at the company get access to the data? Protecting user data extends beyond merely preventing external breaches. It's also about managing internal access. Allowing unrestricted internal access to users' information or being at all lax about this creates multiple points of failure. Every employee with access becomes a potential vector for data leaks, whether inadvertently or malicious. Access to user data, no matter how benign the data may seem, should follow the principle of least privilege. As few people as necessary should ever be able to access this consumer data. These are all things that we can start to be thinking about and really implementing. And then we get into the really exciting territory of homomorphic encryption. Let's talk about real-world applications of homomorphic encryption that are starting to be explored. The promise behind homomorphic encryption is that we can do computation on encrypted data without ever needing to first decrypt it. So this is groundbreaking for privacy. It allows services to provide all kinds of tools for users without ever seeing that raw data in its unencrypted form. So users could store encrypted data in the cloud and run computations on it directly without having to decrypt it, which would ensure that the data remains private, even if a cloud provider is compromised. Patients' medical data can be encrypted and used in search computations without ever exposing individual medical records. There are applications in banks and financial institutions, in private voting systems, in secure data marketplaces, machine learning, especially when data sets are being trained on sensitive information. There are so many ways that this will revolutionize the privacy landscape. But none of this is a reality yet. Homomorphic encryption is computationally intensive. It could be slower than traditional methods. And we've moved past the purely theoretical stage now. But real-world applications are still extremely limited for this, with just a few early-stage deployments and proof of concepts emerging. So one thing that privacy-conscious people can push for is continued research into this area, if you're at a company that might be able to support such work. Having more people working on this encryption technology can steamroll it from its current developmental phase into something used in everyday applications. Next, many companies keep users as uninformed as possible about which data is being collected from them. That is a sad reality. People don't know how it's being used, where it's being shared, how securely it's being stored. And this is often by design. Too often, privacy policies are written as a form of liability insurance instead of for educating the user. And explanations are hidden behind 60 pages of legalese that no user can understand instead of being explained in a way that users can understand. So I think there's an ethical responsibility to users to make sure that privacy policies are really clear about what data is being collected. I think it's important that people really understand what agreements they're entering into and that companies respect their users enough to allow them to make informed decisions about whether they want to use a product or service. So we're here amidst the vanguard of digital innovation at this cloud computing conference. And today, we've delved deep into technical intricacies of building a more connected future. But as we celebrate the marvel that is the modern digital world, in our zeal for innovation, it's vital that we recognize the internet's dual nature. It's as much a beacon for enlightenment as it is a potential tool for surveillance. History is riddled with instances where powerful entities have misused it to target the vulnerable and the voiceless. But the innovators here hold an extraordinary superpower. You have the power to embed privacy into the very fabric of the digital infrastructure that you're constructing. And Switzerland is one of the best places in the world for privacy. So the people in this room are uniquely positioned to play a huge role in the direction of our digital future. Every line of code, every infrastructure choice, every innovation can not only push the boundaries of what's technologically possible, but can also uphold the fundamental right to privacy for billions of people across the globe. So as we craft the web's future, let's not just innovate, let's protect. Every decision that we make can be a step towards a more private, safer internet for all. Thank you so much.